Hello and welcome to Something Rotten. It's the question episode on The Last of Us Part 2. My name is Jacob Geller and I am joined by Blake Hester, and only Blake Hester, because it's just us boys here answering your questions.
Jacob, let's keep it real. Let's keep it 300 with our audience. What is your annoyance level right now?
Look, we've had some tech issues. Here's my higher annoyance level. I could be playing Resident Evil 4, Separate Ways.
Shut the fuck
right
up.
now.
Shut
and I have
the
been
fuck
playing it.
up.
I was playing it just before this call started.
I don't want to hear this shit because I can't play it till next week. I have it installed and I can't touch it.
I am playing with Ada Wong, the woman of the world.
What? Whoa. Don't be
That's
saying
right.
shit like that about my wife. Don't be saying you're playing with my wife.
I got her grappling hook. I got her little spinny kick.
You are out of pocket right now, Jacob Glenn Geller. Stop this. Is it good? Is it good? Yes, no.
Yes. Big
Fuck
thumbs
yeah,
up.
dude.
Turns out Resident Evil 4, a good game that I like to play.
Fuck yeah. Well, that's great. Please don't say anything more about it because I'm very upset that I cannot play it.
Blake's fuming right now.
I'm fuming.
Blake, we are about to start, and you got a call from your vet, I think.
Uh-huh. Well, okay, so I probably would not have answered that if I knew it was the vet. I would have let it go to voicemail because it was not a super important call. They were just checking on my dog, which I do appreciate. I'm going to miss this vet when I move in 2 days. But I thought it was my doctor, and I'm waiting on some test results, which, depending on the results of which, could spell disaster in my future. So that's why I hastily answered the phone, and will do so on this episode if I get another call.
I like the idea that your phone just said doctor and your thumb was covering up the part that said like Reagan, and so you didn't know.
No, it was a number I didn't have saved. It was just like a Minnesota number, so I assumed it was like my doctor. I didn't expect the vet to call and check in on Reagan, but that was a very kind thing of them
It's
to
nice
do.
to do.
Reagan had a dental appointment, so she was a little wonky for a couple days.
Does she have to get braces?
Well, have you ever taken Tori to get the full like oral exam where they clean the teeth, but they also check all her teeth and whatnot? They have to like put them under for that.
No, here's a crazy thing about Tori is every time she goes to the vet, they're like, oh my gosh, her teeth are so clean. And I'm like, I don't do anything. So Tori just has miraculously clean teeth.
They said they did have to pull one of Reagan's teeth. Teeth problems are a pretty common issue in Chihuahuas. But they said overall her teeth were great, which is awesome because I've known other small dogs that people have had that just lose teeth in quick succession. So only one tooth seems pretty good right now.
I once had a friend who had a cat, and the cat was allergic to its own teeth.
What the fuck? Cats are so fucking stupid, dude. Dog supremacy to the day I die.
Did I tell you? I think I told you. Tori had a little adventure the other day where she got bit by a copperhead.
Yeah.
Yes, because you didn't know that was a snake.
No, I didn't. I did see the picture though, and it was horrendous.
Tori, she got Dick Cheney neck for like 2 days. She had the underside of her neck just blew up and then became like real floppy and wiggly.
Oh my god, dude.
But now
That's
she
crazy.
has now it looks like she just has like black rock like embedded in the underside of her neck because it's like it's scabbed
Ew.
black. It's crazy
Ew.
looking, but she's fine. She's all
Ew.
good.
Shouts out Tori, friend of the show.
Anyway, Blake, you want to answer some questions?
I want to answer some questions.
All right. Let's take this question from Adam West. They say,
Wait, what?
yeah, Batman.
Hell yeah. I didn't know he was still alive.
Thank you for listening to our show, Batman. I've had a question about if you think there are rotten sci-fi or fantasy games. All of your seasons talk about a game that takes place in a quote-unquote modern time setting, even if they have fantasy elements. Even The Last of Us, that takes place during the apocalypse, seems really tied to the time right before the apocalypse. Thanks for your time. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Jacob, I put this in here for you to answer because I am frankly not a big sci-fi or fantasy person, and I don't know if you are, but I thought you might have some more interesting perspective on this than I would, so I'm going to sit this question out.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm a big sci-fi person. I'm like a medium fantasy person. You know, as a child, I was really into like Lord of the Rings and things with dragons and stuff. But there are 1000% rotten sci-fi things, like, you know, things that are more along the continuum of sci-fi. A game that I would never make us play, but is 1,000,000% rotten is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the point and click adventure game.
Sure.
In that game, you play as like a Nazi doctor, among other things. There are, I mean, I think something that we might do, something like Soma, you know, which I totally think falls along the line of rotten. You know, there is a whole kind of like, even like Alien, you know, not aliens, but Alien, I think totally can be put along that. And like Alien 3, fucking the like David Fincher Alien, is like the most rotten sci-fi movie.
Really quick, is Soma, is that the Bloober team one?
No, that's Soma's Frictional Games. That's after Amnesia. Bloober made Observer, which is also a pretty rotten game, actually. So yeah, there are tons of them. I think it's an interesting question to think about, like, why we've done mostly modern, you know, kind of contemporary games versus sci-fi, because I actually think there are so many examples. And in part, I think it's probably due to your taste, Blake, that you are just not as sci-fi pilled.
I hadn't really even thought of this until Adam's question. So, like, it hadn't even, I mean, and they're right, I think. I mean, like, Killer 7, I feel like kind of pushes the definition the most out of anything we've played, weirdly enough. But, like, I hadn't even thought of this. It wasn't, like, a conscious decision. And now I need to kind of, like, go through the list and see, are they all like that? It might be worth considering for later seasons. Be like, oh, shit, should we find, like, a fantasy game to play or something?
Yeah.
You know, do we need to play World of Warcraft for a season? I'm saying, Jacob, we have to.
Yeah, a super rotten game. No, but I do think, you know, like another pretty obvious example is Signalis, which recently came out, is like fully rotten. So there are definitely and also it's like The Darkness is kind of a fantasy game. You know, it's like there's magic.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do think it's, you know, I think certainly our original definition of rotten was a lot about like how violence is done to people, and that's more present in just the kind of games where you shoot people with guns.
Not a game, but I will say a very quick rotten sci-fi thing that popped into my head. Paul W.S. Anderson's Event Horizon. You ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
It's the one Paul W.S. Anderson movie everyone loves, and yet I, a massive Paul W.S. Anderson fan, hate that movie. I think it sucks so much. I'm not a fan at all. It's rotten.
And a huge, like, the inspiration for Dead Space, basically. And so it's like, well, then Dead Space is maybe a rotten game. No, it's kind of, Dead Space is almost too polished. Like, I love that game.
Sure.
But it's, you know, but the short answer, yes, there are plenty of rotten sci-fi games. And certainly some fantasy ones, though I'd have to kind of think harder about that.
Yeah, Dead Space, a series I've tried, as I'm sure you know, numerous times to get into and just never can.
You ever played 2?
Never lands for me. Yeah, remember I wrote that piece about the horror of Dead Space 2 a few years ago?
Yeah, but
we talked about it a lot.
Did you get into it?
I got really into the Ishimura section of that game. Dead Space's like horror is very exhausting to me in a way that like kind of turns me off of the games. Like when I played the remake, I never finished it.
Yeah, I guess it's almost, it is similar to Resident Evil 4 for me in that it's just like, I just find it mechanically satisfying, and I'm not like, I've played it enough that I'm never scared by it, and so the jump scares don't even like register. But it is like a kind of annoying form of just like, bah!
There are games, I mean 1 and 2, like I've never played 3, but it feels like they're constantly screaming at you.
Yeah.
And that it's like very exhausting to me, but like they rock. It's more of a me problem than a Dead Space problem. Anyway, you want to move on?
Yes. All right, I'll read this question from Emerson. It's barely even an observation to point out that we're telling a lot of stories about the apocalypse these days, some much more interesting than others. There's a lot I find fascinating in there, and general musings on that are certainly welcome, but more specifically, I'm interested in the things that people imagine surviving and why they chose those things. As a trans girl in scary times, I've been finding comfort lately in the knowledge that queer people have been around since the first generation of humans and will be here until the last. Of course, we'll still be there after the collapse of the world as we know it, but it's interesting to me that the creators of this game, apparently mostly interested in the conflicts arising out of new groups, still chose to import a pretty modern flavor of bigotry. I'm sure you've both heard the phrase about finding it easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. In good ways or bad, what things did you find striking that the developers couldn't imagine the world without?
Pearl Jam.
That's right.
Of all fucking bands, Pearl Jam. No, I mean, we talked a lot about the specific selectiveness of bigotry in this game. In a way, like, the more I've thought about it, and it feels like such a weird thing to be like, this game needs racism. But you know what I'm saying? I think this game kind of needs racism in it. Or remove bigotry entirely. Well, I think the more I've thought about that, because we talked about it so much on the season, like, the more it's kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because it makes the, like, acknowledgement of bigotry kind of feel shallow to not, like, acknowledge all forms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think also our problem is that, like, the game is doing racism still in a number of ways. Right. It's just not acknowledging it, you know, right. Whereas it does acknowledge that there is still, like, homophobia and other things going around. And so I think it's pretty clumsy. I think, you know, what I have been thinking about since our original conversations is just the way that they almost refuse to let the post-apocalypse have a culture that is not just people thinking about the pre-apocalypse. You know, it's like Pearl Jam kind of makes sense for Joel, a guy who was, like, alive before, you know, that he would be, like, holding on to this, because Joel's essentially a boomer in the Last of Us world. But yeah, for Ellie to not have any songs she likes other than just the songs that are, like, were popular before the world ended, and for no one to have any interest in art that was, like, not made after the apocalypse. It's very weird that I feel like The Last of Us cannot imagine a world without just overpowering nostalgia, which is one of the more annoying things I find about our culture. And it's like, I guess it makes sense that people would, you know, be nostalgic for the pre-apocalypse, but, like, it is so weird that it seems to have overpowered any sense of anything that would have been made afterwards.
I think another thing that I found really weird this time playing through The Last of Us Part 2 is the insistence on every character to want to leave their community. Yeah. You know? And, like, the safety of that community. Like, and we talked about this in the Cameron episode. Like, you do have to decouple it a lot from, like, in Abby's case, it's like, you know, she's living under Isaac, who is, like, this violent, psychopathic fascist. But it's like, does she want to leave the Seattle Seahawks stadium? Why do Ellie and Dina not want to live in Jackson? Why is everyone trying to, like, leave the comfort of community that they've ever known? And the game is, like, specifically centered on, like, moving away in a very strange way I don't fully understand.
Well, but I also think the game thinks it's bad that they're doing that. Like, the game being...
You think so?
Yeah, I think the game is like, all of this would have been great if Ellie and Dina stayed in Jackson. Like, it is interesting. It is like, you know, Abby needed to leave because she was, you know, working with a bunch of fascists, essentially.
Sure.
You know, I think one of the failures of the game is that Jackson is the only good place in the entire world, as we talked about a couple of times. And so it's like, yeah, obviously it's dumb for Ellie and Dina to leave there because, like, it's the only good place we ever see. You know, I think basically the story is about people being separated from their families and kind of building new families or failing to do so. But it is certainly, you know, it is a story where no one stays in the place that they were comfortable.
There's a strain of that weird, like, cities or war zones.
Oh, yeah.
Going through this game where everyone's like, the city's too dangerous, we got to get away. And it's like, I don't know. The scariest thing I could imagine is living in a farmhouse in this world.
Yeah, but it's really pretty. It's really pretty there.
It's really pretty. Okay, I'm going to read the next question. Yeah. This comes from Alex, and I thought it was kind of interesting. How old are Abby and Ellie? I looked it up, but I thought it would make a good discussion. Do you think their ages contextualize their actions at all? Do they seem to act their age? How old do you think they are or appear to be, mainly regarding the violence they commit and the lengths they go to commit that violence? Several times while playing this game, I had to remind myself that Ellie is like 19. And I kind of, I'm of two trains of thought here. On the one hand, I was always like, damn, that's crazy. Maybe that explains her actions. On the other hand, I'm like, I wish I would have really thought deeper about that. I don't know that the game is necessarily doing anything interesting with the fact that Ellie specifically is like a child still. But it is fun to think about whether or not that is influencing her reactions to things.
Yeah.
Abby, I'm not sure how old Abby is.
My guess for Abby is like 24.
Let me see. Early 20s.
Yeah. I think, I think she reads as a little older than Ellie, basically.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, and it's interesting to, basically to think about if the writers put a lot of stake in this, because I do think there are scenes where Ellie, acts kind of impulsively, or, kind of is seeming to, she wants to front as like tougher than she is, which feels like a 19-year-old thing to do. But also it's like there are very few actions she takes in the story that I think Joel would not have taken. Right. And so the question is like, well, does Joel act like a 19-year-old, or is this world just so coded as like everyone can only see things through the lens of killing people that like the kind of it breaks down?
Yeah, I actually don't think like, I think I really like this question, but I think it's more just like a fun thought experiment than something like the game was written with in mind. Does that make sense?
I think generally the game is kind of operating on like they're young adults, and young adults, we give them kind of the benefit of rationality. I think it'll honestly be interesting in the show in season 2 to be like, Bella Ramsey looks pretty young. And even though there will be time between the seasons, and I'm sure that they'll be able to do makeup to like age them up, they're a pretty young looking actor in a way that I think video game people just kind of become like flat. You don't really think about their ages. And I am so curious who they cast as Abby, because I think that will be an impactful choice no matter what.
I do think I don't think Abby is the most emotionally mature character in the world, but I do think it's interesting to compare and contrast her against Ellie and see the way she is a little more mature. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's a violent psychopath the way Ellie is, but less sporadic in a lot of the game, it seems, which is kind of fascinating. And I do wonder if that like her age was taken into consideration there, or they just needed a character that wasn't as fucking gnarly as Ellie.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wouldn't have worked to have her younger than Ellie.
Oh,
Sure. I'm sure they thought about it a little.
On the other hand, though, Lev, definitely younger than Ellie, and
for sure.
Definitely Abby, and the most emotionally mature person in the entire fucking game, other than like maybe Yara.
In the franchise, yeah.
Yeah. Like, so, fun question.
Blake, we all know December is the best month to give gifts.
All right, Hotshot, what you get me then?
The warm glow of friendship?
You made me play anatomy. There's no glow left. This is a dying star. Whatever this is, it's done, Jacob.
Okay, how about a lifetime Nebula membership?
Wait, really? A lifetime? That's like 45 years. At the clip I'm going.
Nebula has brought back lifetime memberships for the month of December, and now you can also give them to other people. The link is slightly different for this. It's in the show's description. But imagine it's the day before Christmas or the day before Hanukkah. I don't know when Hanukkah is.
What?
You don't have a gift. Hanukkah is a different date every year, Blake. Imagine that you scramble, but then you buy your loved one a lifetime Nebula membership. Imagine the smile on their face when you tell them they can listen to every episode of Something Rotten early with tons of bonus episodes and no ads for their whole life.
Now it just feels like you're being sarcastic.
Blake, imagine the affection you'll be showered with when you tell them that they can watch exclusive videos from their favorite Nebula creators like me, Leo Vader, Patrick Willems, Philosophy Tube, and more.
You including yourself in that list?
Yep.
You don't know who I hang out with. I'm just going to buy a Nebula subscription for myself. I don't feel like you're being serious with me right now, Jacob Glynn.
You can do that too. It's $250 for a month, or you could treat yourself to a lifetime subscription.
Okay. What are you actually getting me?
Smile? Blake, I think I'm a person famous for having a beard. But sometimes
This is how you're going to start our sponsorship read.
sometimes it gets too much, you know? It can get scratchy. It can get out of hand. I mean, we're about to enter soup season, Blake. If I don't take care of this somehow, I'll be a mess.
I'm not participating in this. You just say whatever it is you're going to say.
But controlling my beard is easy because I have a Henson razor and I actually do love it. Henson sells premium safety razors made out of metal designed to never be thrown away and designed to use super cheap, super sharp standard razor blades. While the buy-in on Henson is higher than a cartridge razor you might get off the shelf, those costs flip pretty quickly. I've been using my Henson for a couple years now, and I'm still working through the box of blades that you can get free by going to hensonshaving.com and using the promo code ROTTEN.
Okay, so the script says, but how does it shave, Jacob?
Thanks for asking, Blake. It shaves great. These razors are constructed to have such an exact specification that the blade only sticks out a tiny, tiny bit, meaning it's actually really easy to shave and really hard to cut yourself. It's a good product.
Okay, yeah, I do like them too. I have to admit. I also have to shave to get ready for soup season. Go to hensonshaving.com and use promo code ROTTEN to get a razor and a free box of 100 blades.
It's soup season, baby.
Or post a successful Nebula podcast so you get them for free. It's a great deal.
That's right.
Actually, that would save you money, listener. Do that instead. Let's see. I'll read the second one too. This comes from Patty. The biggest feeling I keep coming back to when thinking of The Last of Us Part 2, a game that I do love, is that it doesn't want to be a video game. It doesn't respect that medium sense. It keeps playing tug-of-war with its mechanics and narrative. When it's talked about by its creators, it's barely compared to other AAA or indie, and was constantly trying to adapt into a higher form of art until it eventually did. It's a complicated idea because if I say Neil Druckmann didn't think it should be a video game, then I don't think he would be working in video games. I just can't escape this feeling of The Last of Us Part 2 trying to ascend above video games as an art form, while not bringing anything as interesting to the table as his contemporaries in the indie scene who don't have the same money and resources. I asked the Rotten Crew. The Rotten Crew. I kinda like
That's
that.
us.
Team Rot. Do you think The Last of Us respects the medium of video games or itself as a video game?
This is always a kind of the question with these big AAA games. It is kind of like, are they trying to be movies? And certainly... certainly that has been the feeling with Naughty Dog since Uncharted is
Yes.
does it wish that this could be a movie? I think to Naughty Dog's credit, they make their movie sections are a lot more playable.
Sure.
Like thinking about Uncharted set pieces, it's like you're still doing stuff while that happens. More than more than some other games that you could level this accusation at. But I do think there is that feeling of like video games are not good enough to tell this story. We are going to elevate it to something like a film, which can handle more emotionally mature stories.
So we talked about this a bit on an episode, but I think more so than The Last of Us Part 1, which the HBO show has proved works just as fine, if not better in some respects, as a show. I think The Last of Us Part 2 earns its need to be a video game more than that one does. I do think in general, to this question, the issue with AAA games in general is I think a lot of creators see their grandest aspirations as being equivalent to film. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot about the Suda quote that we brought up in the season, where he was like, someone asked him, hey, was this game inspired by Kill Bill? And he was like, I don't hold games in such contempt that I would blindly mimic film, which is I think he makes games that only work as games. It's like, what the fuck is a Killer 7 movie? It sucks. It's boring, right? As a game, though, it's very interesting. I don't want to just like compare like Western games versus Eastern games because I think that's like a dull conversation.
Well,
but
here's
here's
an Eastern comparison is like, I think Hideo Kojima makes really interesting games. Absolutely a dude who seems like he wishes he was making movies, even though I think mechanically his games are super interesting and could only be games.
But I also think like in the moments in Kojima's games where like they are most wanting to be a movie, the cutscene, he understands the medium of video games so well that he creates things that would be impossible shots in movies, right? Like I think about some of the single takes in Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah.
Specifically the one with like Skullface and I think Sahelanthropus, where they're just insane single shot camera pans, where it's like you couldn't do it would be the most expensive movie ever made. And I think like he understands the medium better even when he's trying to like mimic film and like make solid use of being a video game.
It's interesting you say that because, Blake, you're not someone who sees... you are way more knowledgeable about film than I am, but I think I see more blockbuster trash than you do. And it's like, recently, most big CGI action movies do exactly that kind of fake camera shit. That it's like they all have like digital cameras that they're moving around in impossible ways and stuff, and so it's almost like the it's eating itself, like they are copying. I've seen many games, many movies, both good and bad, that are like very directly imitating games. John Wick 4 has that whole scene that I think is specifically inspired by the Hong Kong massacre, but like basically looks like Hotline Miami. So it's interesting, and I do think, to The Last of Us Part 2's credit, I think that, like, I often, I feel AAAs are so boring compared to what's in the indie space. I think mechanically that's, like, probably still true with The Last of Us Part 2, but, like, it's certainly a more interesting AAA than most other AAAs coming out, even if I, I'm not sure if that means I'm actually super positive on it or not. It's just like the places that it is most interesting are things that could be done in film or whatever, because it's like it's narrative swings are where I find the most to grab onto.
In the camp of The Last of Us Part 2, coming to its defense, it is a game I don't want to watch. Though I know Annie had a great experience watching it, but like it is a story I would much rather interact with than watch passively.
Well, I mean, and in our bonus episode, which you can hear me and Annie talking about Last of Us Part 2 on Nebula, she says, like, even though she was watching me play, she was like, I still think it's better as a game than the experience of watching the show. Like, she still was like, even though I was not interacting with it, the idea of interactivity made it more compelling than just like the HBO version.
Right. Also, Nebula listeners, you can hear that next week. Normal feed listeners, you can't hear that unless you sign up for Nebula.
Boop, boop. JD says, first time writer here. Congratulations. First time writing. So when I saw that you were doing The Last of Us, I was hesitant to listen, mostly because of the seething anger I felt over the second game. I found it especially difficult to disengage from the hostility I felt towards the character of Abby. As to why I felt this hostility, well, I felt anyways that she was never forced to confront the lies that she believed. That her father was a good man and that the Fireflies were justified in their actions. I could talk at length about the subject, but more to my point, have you ever been presented with a piece of media that so affected you that you found you had to abandon it or couldn't effectively talk about it due to the emotional intensity you felt towards it? If so, what media and why?
So, reading this question unlocked a memory in my brain.
Yeah.
When The Last of Us Part 2 came out, I wrote my piece for Unwinnable. And then I basically, other than Kenneth Shepard, did not talk to, like, anyone about it for, like, months. I was just like, that's my thing. That's my experience. As you know, I'm a big fan of The Last of Us. I like the characters so much. I played this game, had a great attachment to it, and saw the way the discourse was going. I was like, I'll write my piece, and then I'm going to just back away from this whole thing. And that was that. So, yes, this game.
But it wasn't that you felt anger towards, like, the game. It was, like, the conversation.
Oh, sure. Okay. I get, maybe I misunderstood the question.
I think here's what I thought of while reading this question is a very silly comparison to The Last of Us, but I was watching the movie The Mitchells versus the Machines the other day, which is an animated movie as kind of like the Spider-Verse crew made a different animated movie was kind of how I heard talk about it. But it reminded me of this this kind of version of story that I find in a lot of things, which is like parents and children butting heads, where it's just kind of like, oh, it's a coming of age story where like the kid wants something and the parent wants something else for them, and eventually they have to meet in the middle. And almost always in these stories, I find it, going back to our discussion on age, it's like the kid is like 17 and kind of annoying, and the parent is like comically abusive. And then the story is like, oh, they both just need to understand each other. And it's like, I find it so hard to ever get on board with those stories because I'm like, the parent should be, like, the kid doesn't need to change that much. They're 17. The parent who is, like, an established adult really needs to get over their shit way more. And I always find those, even though it's like Mitchells versus the Machines has, like, some, otherwise enjoyable, I was, like, so angry at that. Just that plot point, and I've experienced it in kind of other versions of that same story, that it's like I can't get past it because I just feel like like JD, one character is just so obviously wrong more than the other one.
Like this American Life story you and I talked about recently, where the reporter's mom didn't want her to drink. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, what? Anyway, we don't need to get into it. I don't think I have anything specific to this, but it did remind me, do you remember when AJ went and saw Beau is Afraid and hated it so much he refused to talk about it? Which was like the most uncharacteristic AJ thing of all time. Like, I saw the movie and I was like not trying to like fight with him on it, but I was like, man, I'm really curious what you didn't like. And he was just like, I don't even want to talk about that movie. And we've never talked about it. And I was like, all right. Weird thing. But
well, you're about to live together, so now you can like torture him into telling you about it.
I'm gonna confront him because I think that movie's fine. I don't think I have anything specific about this. I mean, there are games like I don't want to talk about because I'm so fucking exhausted, like God of War 2018. I hate when those discussions come up, but it's not like a...
Okay, but here's the thing, we talk about that game all the time.
Yeah, but that's a safe space where I don't have to hear it be like, it was groundbreaking.
I definitely have I have definitely experienced, I can't think of a game right now, but it's like if I really don't like a game, I just don't even want to hear anyone say anything positive about it. And it's like, excuse me.
Can't edit that one out.
I try to I try to be normal about it. It's like I know that's not a healthy impulse, and so I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to detach from that game's conversation. Anyway, Robert says, I don't ever do this, but I wanted to email you guys and say that I think your podcast is rad and have been enjoying listening to it for a bit now. This season in particular has been really well done, and all your guests have been great. Thank you. Prior to this series, your podcast actually inspired me to play The Last of Us Part 2 a couple months ago, so that way I could analyze my feelings about it as a whole. In episode 2 for The Last of Us Part 2 series, I thought Blake's comparisons of the decisions that Ellie made through the game to his own personal experience with addiction were really well stated and helped direct me to his full article about it. Honestly, I wish I had read it much earlier than this, because this game has had me in a chokehold for a while, and I think this analysis is really insightful and well written on some aspects of the story. And well written on some of the aspects of the story I think are the most interesting. I was originally going to ask a question or put some of my own read of the game in here, but I think I'll just settle on saying that I really enjoy your podcast and can't wait to hear more from this series in particular. Thanks, Robert.
No question. Just putting a compliment in there. Jacob doesn't read our emails, so he never sees all the nice compliments that people write in without questions. They're just like, your show's cool. So I just thought I'd include one, Jacob, so you know, people like this show.
That rules.
Okay, I'll read this one. You both mentioned that this comes from Mitchell. You both mentioned that you think it's weird that after things have somewhat settled, the people don't create anything. Specifically, that everything in Fallout seems to be made out of something that was created before the end of the world. You think that touches in The Last of Us 2, like Ellie's songwriting in her journal, or Joel apparently picking up woodworking alleviate that weirdness? Or does it just put even more of a spotlight on the fact that apparently no one in Jackson is into making their own comics when Ellie keeps talking about how much she wishes there were more comics? I think it makes it more weird that there is no culture in this world.
Yeah, we don't need to restate ourselves, but I do think it's good that Mitchell, who's not the Mitchell versus the Machines, as far as I know, that like Ellie does write songs and poetry, and Joel woodworks, but seemingly like none of that influences anyone else. It's like they all just keep it secret to themselves. Like, no one is ever like, oh, Joel, what beautiful woodworking, it inspired me to do this. And maybe that's just with those two people because they're both so bad at expressing their emotions.
The more I think about it, the more I get hung up on this. But, like, it's so weird to me that there are no traveling theater groups in the world of The Last of Us.
Yeah.
It's like, I understand why they're not making movies and television. But, like, really? No one goes and does live theater? Like, it's very strange to me.
Yeah, there absolutely would be.
Exactly. They'd
be fucking doing, like, Greek choruses and shit.
Okay, so none of I'll read the next two because they're not questions, and they're pretty short. This comes from Jack. I work at EB Games, Australian GameStop. Shouts out to the mothership. And working during the mothership for me being GameStop, not Australia. And working during the Last of Us Part 2 launch window was hell. People would buy the game and return it a few hours later because Joel died. Me and my coworkers copped legit abuse because people were so outraged about this. I had people yell at me to take it off the shelf because they heard there were trans characters and lesbians in the game. Great community, 10 out of 10. I included that because it was one of the wilder things I think I've ever heard about working in video game retail. So there you go.
That's wild.
I'm very sorry.
This reminded me,
Jack.
There was a period where like my local mall had both an EB Games and a GameStop in it. And I was like, what's this about? Why aren't they owned by the same company?
No one knows. No one knows. Okay, this comes from Bill. On Blake's recommendation, I read In the Miso Soup, and I wanted to ask, what the fuck, man? In all seriousness, it got so under my skin that had a hard time putting it down. So thanks for the rec. Would be fascinating to hear a book club episode on it. Wanted to include this, Jacob, to remind us we should do that book club episode.
Yeah, I'm down.
I packed it up in a box the other day. Saw how short it was. I was like, man, this is an easy weekend read we can blast through. All right.
Okay, Vega writes in, says, in an earlier season, Blake oh so daringly announced a take that feels especially relevant to The Last of Us, that high-budget mainstream games have overall worse writing than their counterparts in mediums like film, television, and literature, and that our standards for a quote-unquote good game story are ridiculously low compared to other mediums. I think this is an incredibly interesting stance, and I think about that a lot. Don't cease and desist me, Jacob. And I keep waffling back and forth on whether or not I fully agree. Generally, I land on the side of, yeah, mainstream games writing is generally mediocre at best, which is, as I'm sure Blake agrees, an interesting realization to have as someone who tends to connect more deeply with games than other forms of fiction, and a complicated belief to hold simultaneously with the belief that interactive storytelling has the theoretical potential to be so wonderfully experimental and emergent and grand and personal. And now, the thing that I've been thinking about a whole goddamn lot is, why? Not why would someone prefer one medium over another, but literally, why does the writing in expensive / mainstream games tend to suck?
You know, that of all the things I've said on the internet, I think that is the one that has haunted me the most over the last 3.5 years. It's interesting revisiting that statement because it comes up a lot. And I have played a lot of very just like excellent story-driven games since then. One we will be talking about next season, which I think has like simultaneously given me hope for the future of storytelling in games and also increased cynicism that the last 20 years have not just birthed 36 games as good as it.
Yeah.
Though I think it's like increased influence, is still a positive thing. It's also before I played The Unfinished Swan, which is a game that I think is just like amazingly written and like does a lot with like its mechanics to tell that story. I played that like last year or something, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
Interesting. Do you like Unfinished Swan more than Edith Finch?
It's hard to say because I played Edith Finch like when it came out, and I really don't remember a lot of the specifics of it, other than when that dude chops his own head off, which is such a good moment. But
hold on,
yeah, I don't.
Wait a minute.
What?
What does that happen in Edith Finch?
And the fish cannery.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, Jesus, yeah, that absolutely does happen.
Yeah, and the horror comment. I just don't remember the specifics of it, but like, Unfinished Swan, because I played it relatively recently. I was just like, such an amazing game. Fucking love that game. Anyway, I don't know. Like, what do you think about this? Because when we first talked about this, I always got the sense you didn't agree with me, and I don't know if you've changed your stance or you still don't agree with me. Like, what do you think?
Well, okay, so they're kind of two parts here. I think there is actually a pretty understandable answer to why does writing in mainstream games tend to suck, which is that games are not built around a story in the same way that any other medium is.
Not always. Not always.
Yes, and I think, I think the most, like an analog that you could make is that games are kind of like, they're like big set piece movies where it's like, we just have to get to the point where like these two guys can fight in space or whatever, because like the way that a game is made is, I think people figure out, this varies obviously, but people figure out a general outline, and then kind of a lot of the work starts happening simultaneously, where it's like level designers are doing their things, and like combat designers are figuring out the combat, and the enemy designers are making enemies and bosses and whatever. And often writing is kind of viewed as some of the most adaptable in that, because it doesn't involve like literal asset creation per se. And so what will happen is that games make a bunch of levels, and then the writers are told, hey, figure out how to connect these. We at the end, can you figure out the story that will take us from this place to this place? And it's, in good writing advice, kill your darlings. Even if something's great, if it doesn't fit with the larger whole, you should cut it out. That's way easier to do as like an individual writer on a novel than like a video game that has a finished level and it turns out that level isn't working for the story.
Yeah. I think when I think about games that were clearly written with the story first and then the game around them, those tend to be games that like I think really hold up as like amazing stories. Like What Remains of Edith Finch, Unfinished Swan, one of the games for next season. I just had another one that popped to mind. Yakuza 0, which I think is like one of the best stories in games. I'm just kind of saying all the cliche Blake games at this point. Killer 7, my God, a game that as time goes on, I think I think the story is better and better. I'm bringing this up because it's like I maybe didn't have that train of thought back when I said this original statement, but I think like when you can tell a game is written with its story in mind first, and then a lot of the other pieces come around it, you get a much stronger game narratively, which like if we've seen anything over the last 2 decades is like alongside all the Destiny likes and multiplayers, like there is still a large push for narrative based single player games, as much as we want to act like there isn't. There fucking is. And it's when you can tell that the writer is very high up on the totem pole of this thing, or the writing team, I should say. I think the rest of the game is very strong. I still don't always think even the best stories in games always hold a candle to some mediocre stories in other mediums, but
yeah, I think in this case, The Last of Us 2 is a good example of a game that was written around its story and didn't have to have its story written around the game. Like Naughty Dog's willingness to throw huge chunks of development out, which is something that's kind of only possible because of like how much money they get from Sony and whatever. Like, it is not a luxury that most studios have to work for like, 7 years on a game. But like, it doesn't, even though The Last of Us 2 is like a very long game and probably overlong, it doesn't feel like there's a level that they threw in just because they made the level and then they were like, oh, we got to figure out how the story fits in here, which is what I feel about a lot of kind of game stories. Is just like, why we just needed another level, and so the story had to explain why there's another level.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This comes from Blake Hester, long time, first time. You know, we're running a little short on this episode, so I'm going to pad the runtime. Jacob, in the last 2 decades we'll limit it to AAA, whether that's AAA in 2001 or AAA in 2023. What are the best stories in games?
We're doing this?
I'm curious your thoughts. I feel like I don't know. And it can't be indie because that's there's too many good stories there. Like, it has to be AAA.
Yeah, God, that is tough. And I almost feel like I haven't played a lot of the ones that is potentially,
Sure.
You know, it seems like Baldur's Gate 4 might be
let's say
an answer.
Let's say AA and AAA.
Or sorry, Baldur's Gate 3, right?
Yep.
Baldur's
Right,
Gate
Baldur's
4.
Gate 3.
Hey, well, Baldur's Gate 4, that story's going to be off the hook. You just wait.
Yeah, you're writing it, right?
You know, and then AA is hard because it's like, does Disco Elysium count as AA?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Disco Elysium is the best video game story ever written, so that's number one. You know, I'm trying to think about like what my favorite AAA stories are, and specifically ones that feel very writerly. You know, I don't know. It's like I love Death Stranding, but like if we're specifically evaluating just how good that story is, not super high.
I like the story, but you know, I think Kojima is a better idea man than actual writer, and that game has some truly terrible dialogue.
You know, it's like I really like. It's just so hard because it's like, what do I like versus what do I think is like good? You know, it's like I love the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think that's like such an interesting story and whatever, but it still has like, you know, if you just had to sit down and like watch the movie version of that game, it would still be like, why is all this bullshit happening? I don't care about this, you know?
Well, you can watch the movie version of the game Advent Children. It fucking rocks.
No, yeah, and you do love that.
I do like that movie. I think as a longtime fan of the RGG studio games, I have been chasing a high I've never gotten from their work since Yakuza 0. And it's a game I'm kind of scared to revisit in full because I'm like, have I just completely overblown this thing in my mind? But like, that is like one of the quickest stories I look to. It's like, that's one of my favorite stories in games. Is just like Yakuza 0 start to finish. And like some of the better, I think, cutscenes and the way they deliver that story is really incredible.
Yeah, you know, obvious answer, Red Dead Redemption 2
Sure.
is pretty fucking good, pretty undeniable. You know, I think it's like begging the question of like, what do we mean by story? Because I think Bloodborne is like...
Count it.
Yeah, you know, but it's like, that is a game where, sure, there is a lot of lore that you can find, but that is entirely like a tone piece story that I like, you know, where it's like, it's not like I could tell you here exactly the, you know, like,
no, man,
the moments, but
I think Bloodborne totally counts. Like, if we limit it to just like what has good cutscenes, it's a boring conversation. You know what I'm saying? I mentioned it earlier, but the further we get away from it, like Killer 7, like I love that game more and more every day. Do you even think about that game?
It would certainly not be anywhere near my top of best stories of all time.
That's because you didn't read the book, so you don't even know half the fucking story.
Yeah, which I would define as a failing of the game.
Whatever, Mr. Smarty Pants. You read so many fucking books. Shut up.
Yeah, and I'm not like, well, now obviously I understand this game is good because I read the book of it.
And also the first game of next season, but not the second game of next season.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Jacob, finally, this podcast is improving my miserable life.
Oh, you're finding value in the work? You like these games that we've been playing?
No, of course not. We play terrible games. I just actually got to try the sponsorship we've been talking about. I got a Henson razor.
Oh, yes, sir. Last razor you'll ever need.
Truly, it is amazing. I like it so much, I've just started shaving all over my body. My arms, my eyebrows, my legs, everything. I am smooth as a baby's bum, baby boy. And dear listener, you too can experience this bliss if you just go to hensonshaving.com and use the promo code ROTTEN.
You gonna use this razor to shave your head like Max Payne now?
All I'm saying is if Max Payne had a Henson razor, he would not have looked so damn patchy. That's hensonshaving.com, promo code ROTTEN.
You know, I think I think Wolfenstein, the New Order,
Oh,
the
yeah.
first Wolfenstein is
Both of them.
yeah,
I mean, I like them both together as a like one story. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. I think playing them back to back, the tone shift between 1 and 2 is like pretty marked,
Sure.
and ultimately I just like the first one's story better. But I do think, in general, I still think that Wolfenstein 2 is like batting way above where most AAA stories get to.
Is it a cliche to say Near Automata?
We're dealing in cliches, baby.
Yeah, I mean, like, Rockstar's knocked it out of the park several times. Like, Grand Theft Auto 4 has a great story. Red Dead 2 also has a great story. Red Dead 2 has, like, so many moments I think about. Like, the whole assault on that plantation, I just think about so frequently. The way they, like, frame a lot of the gameplay in that so that, like, you get to play the big story moments. Fucking seeing Dutch dragging that woman by the doorway at one point is, like, so fucking crazy. The whole walk up to it. The whole dying on that mountaintop and staring off, and then they do the fucking epilogue, and it's like, your story didn't really need all this, but here we go.
Oh, I'm an epilogue defender.
That's crazy, man. Like, it could have just ended right there with John Marston, or Arthur Morgan dying. It would have been fine.
Yeah, it could have.
You didn't bring up Shadow of the Colossus, you little freak.
Yeah, well, because this is that, like, I don't know, if we're just going for one, Shadow of the Colossus almost feels like PS2 AAA is just such a different conversation. I guess if Killer 7 counts, then Shadow of the Colossus counts.
You said Bloodborne. We counted Bloodborne.
Bloodborne is more AAA, I think.
We said AA and AAA.
Yeah, okay, well then I don't know, because it's like, is Outer Wilds fucking AA? AA is an impossible to define thing.
You know a game I think has a really cool story people don't think about? Fucking Rez.
You're right, I don't think about that game's story.
Rez has a wild story, dude.
I feel like you're just naming games you like.
Yeah, that's the point of the question.
It's like, look, I love Tetris Effect. I'm not gonna be like Tetris Effect story #1.
It doesn't have a story. Also, Tetris Effect is not fun. I don't like that game at all.
Okay, this is gonna replace games don't have good stories as your worst take.
I'm not just naming games I like because I haven't said any of the Max Payne games yet.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be like, Max Payne 3, as much as I like that game, has one of the greatest stories in all of video games. Rez has a cool story, dude.
Rez would not be on my top 100 good game stories, but I respect you putting it up there.
It's because you're not a true believer, dude. Rez is unbelievable. Anyway, I don't know. Question didn't go the way I hoped it would. I thought you were going to be more interested in my question. Sorry, Blake. Thanks for writing it.
I mean, if you want me, I'll just name off my favorite games.
Okay, name them off.
Resident Evil 4.
That's your favorite game of all time.
My favorite game of all time switches. Honestly, usually I say my favorite game of all time is the Beginner's Guide. Beginner's Guide. Resident Evil 4. Bayonetta. Shadow of the Colossus.
Great
story. You want me to keep going?
Yes, I want you to keep going. Then I'll name mine.
You have your 5 like ready. I feel like we've done this before where you were like, you could just rattle them off.
Keep going.
Silent Hill 2,
Okay.
Beat Saber.
I've lost count.
I mean, Eco
9.
and The Last Guardian are both up there. Probably all Ueda's are in my top 10.
Okay.
Those.
Here's mine, because mine's been changing a bit recently.
Yeah. Oh, Outer Wilds and Disco Elysium.
Okay, now you're at like 13 games.
No, I'm pretty sure that's 10.
No. Tony Hawk's Underground, Resident Evil 4, Yakuza 0, Bayonetta, Sis While We're Friends. Look, there's 2 of the same. You ready for this one?
Yeah.
Killer 7.
There you go.
One of the Max Paynes, but I'm not sure which one. Maybe
I'm assuming 2 or 3?
Probably 1 or 2.
Okay.
Nier Automata. Depending on the day, Death Stranding, but I'm going to say I can only get to 7. I don't know. This is too hard. I can't remember what games I've played.
So much criticism towards me.
In a month, when I'm finally settled, maybe a game from next season. But, like, I'm pumping the brakes. I don't want to say it too soon, but
I respect that.
I was truly sick in the head for that game, and still kind of am. You want to get to the last question?
Yeah, Holden says, I'd be interested to see y'all's perspective on a game called Ready or Not. It's a tactical first-person shooter that's a successor to SWAT 4. It has politics that I'm not sure about, but it is absolutely the most rotten game I've ever played before. So this is just a question for you, so you can get mad at me for not watching that YouTube video.
Jacob, I'm sending you a small screen cap of my desktop right now, so you know that at the drop of a hat, I'm literally ready to play it. You see it up there in the top?
I do see it.
You see what it's right over? I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, you got quite a desktop layout here. Friends, Ready or Not is immediately over dog hump puke gif.
I think that might be the one Leo and me recut. Let me see, dog. Oh, it is the one we recut. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
A few days ago, Blake told me it with the excitement of someone describing winning a gold medal at the Olympics, how he and Leo Vader recut a gif of a dog humping another dog and then puking. So it worked better to music? That was the idea.
And it works to every single song. Also, hold on. Don't diminish his accomplishment. Suriel Vasquez helped a lot on this.
That's right.
Yeah, I feel like this picture tells an entire tale, because you have a picture of Reagan, Resident Evil 4, the dog hump puke gif, and then a game that is probably awful propaganda. It's really Blake / Something Rotten in like a nutshell right there. I'm ready. I want to play this game so badly. I think it's the most rotten game that we would play in good faith. Does that make sense? Because it's like,
yeah, because it's not.
We're not going to play
hatred,
Postal.
It's not Postal.
Yeah. I think it is the most rotten game we could still get something.
When did this? Okay,
of.
you've watched the video on this game. Who's that by? Ready or Not?
God.
It's called like Is Ready or Not Propaganda.
Give me 1 second to look it up. Vamp a little.
But I think I'm curious about this game because a YouTube channel that we really like, Faceful of Eyes, did something on SWAT 4 that was very interesting to hear them talk about.
It's by the YouTube channel Gunmetal. It's a very good video. I highly recommend it.
What is this game? Like,
so it's similar to SWAT 4. Like, effectively, it is a tactical multiplayer game. Mm-hmm. But there is a real focus on storytelling. A lot of it is just environmental storytelling. A lot of videos you see are people just like taking the time to explore the levels and piece together what is throughout a level to like be like, okay, this is who this is, you know? This is I think what is very interesting about the video I saw is like you can kind of watch footage of Ready or Not and be like, this is just a cop simulator, right? Mm-hmm. And what that video does is, and it's impossible to know without playing it, is how charitable the video maker is being towards the game, how much maybe they're reading too far into it. But they're like, you know, this game is using the facade of America's militarized police to kind of comment on it. And, you know, it's telling stories through gameplay, and it's making criticisms through gameplay about the way militarized police actually handles a lot of cases in America. So it's like, it makes it hard when thinking about playing this game is like, how much legwork do we have to do? Or like, you know, charitable readings do we have to do to be like, okay, is this game actually doing something interesting? I don't know. But like, I think there's, the point being, like, I don't know if I'm kind of just rambling here, but like, I think there's more to this game than like, oh, it's a game where you and your friends play as cops.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it is doing something very interesting. It's just whether or not that interestingness is like, wow, this fucking sucks. Or like, wow, they made a really interesting piece of, I don't know, like criticism or something.
Yeah, I am curious about it because I feel like the, there is a thing in a lot of criticism of cops or whatever where like I could watch, if you're just talking about like, you're watching like body cam footage, I watch something and I'm like, Jesus Christ, look at this. Isn't this an indictment of how cops function? And some, Blue Lives Matter person could watch it and be like, yep, that's what cops do. Where it's like, it feels almost impossible to not bring your own politics into it, where it's like, if this shows someone, you know, fucking kicking down a door and like flashbanging a child, I would be like, wow, what a criticism of cops. But someone who's like into cops would be like, their job is so tough. They just got to do this sometimes. And so I am curious at how much, you know, if the game was just an accurate depiction of being a cop, I'm pretty sure I would play it and come away with, this sucks shit. But I don't know if that's like, you know, if you give the game the credit for doing that, or if you just give it the credit of, it is kind of a painting an accurate picture and you can put your own politics onto it.
And there are definitely things I've seen of the game where I'm like, this is too fucking much. Like, you are trying to make something rotten and just like completely stepping outside the bounds of good taste. And not in the way Postal or Hatred does, where that's the point. Like, it seems like there was an earnest attempt here and they just bungled it.
Yeah.
But I think there's something more interesting going on with Ready or Not. A big issue is actually playing it, because you and me are not big tactical multiplayer people. We'd have to play this game together with other people, probably.
Oh,
and it would just kind of be a nightmare. But
yeah, here's my guess. The people still playing this multiplayer game, not going to be interested in nuanced critiques of the police state.
I mean, like, I've talked to friends about playing this. Like, I think Leo's interested in playing it. Like, we could get a trusty group.
Okay, we could get a safe space.
Yeah, like, I think Jay... Do you know Jay Guisao? He's an intern, worked at Game Informer as a part-timer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He really wants to play it. So it's like, we could play this game without just randos and actually have a better experience. But it is not a game you and I... It's not a genre you and I typically gravitate towards, which is a whole different thing. But
yeah,
I'm interested in it. I'm glad someone wrote in about it, because I think this game's getting pretty popular right now, and especially given the landscape we are in as Americans, I think a lot of people have kind of a magnifying glass to it to be like, does this suck, or is there something interesting here? And it's been kind of fascinating for me to see, like, there might be something cool going on with this game, but I don't know, maybe there isn't. Who knows?
It's made me think about Unrecord, which people wrote in about a few seasons ago, which is that body cam game that you know, kind of looked real. Here is a is this rotten game for you. Battlefield Hardline. Is Battlefield Hardline rotten, or is it just stupid?
Bro Dog Millionaire, dude. This is on our list.
Is it?
Yeah, we've talked about doing a cop season.
Okay. I have forgotten.
Oh, no, it's not. Okay.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
We've talked about doing it, though. I'm adding it to the list. We have talked about doing it. I would love to do Battlefield Hardline, because I remember a lot of, I want to say maybe Austin Walker, when that game came out, he had a review about it that was like, hey, everybody, pay the fuck attention to this shit. It's a bad game and it looks stupid, but like, maybe we should pay attention to what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if I'm speaking for Austin, but you know what
I think that was actually a fairly early on, like, Austin review. Yeah, because it was for Paste, so it was before like Waypoint even existed. That I think
it was before he was at Giant Bomb, I think. So that should
it. You know, and so it was. Yes, I remember that review as being both like, here is a really good engagement with a game, and also like, here's someone writing about games in a very interesting way, and you know, not the whole industry, because games writing still kind of sucks in a lot of ways, but like a lot of the most interesting parts of the games writing industry have basically followed that path.
We should do that game. It's rotten, and I think it's worth looking at.
All right, cop season. Just you wait, dear listeners.
Yeah, what are other cop games that we could play? Fucking Virtua Cop? That would be too good. We'd have too much fun. I love Virtua Cop.
Yeah, you got Battlefield Hardline. You got there's a game called like Door Breakers. God, what is that fucking game called? I wrote a review. Door Kickers. Door Kickers is a SWAT game. I wrote a review of Door Kickers, some other game for Kane and Rince. Door Kickers Action Squad. One of the very few reviews that I've ever written that I was like, this is a game where you play as cops. Yeah. So I don't know. There are plenty of cop games. We could do Sleeping Dogs.
Bro, I literally said that to you the other day.
Yeah, and I don't want to do it because it's too long.
Isn't Disco Elysium a cop game?
Yes. Disco Elysium is the cop game.
Here's the thing. then we can end this season. But I'm going to say this right now, okay?
Okay.
Jacob Glenn Geller, one of my dearest friends on earth. Is it okay that I say your middle name on this show?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to make it any, like, easier for people to dox me.
Jacob Glenn Geller, who lives at, I don't know your address, you extended such grace to me this season by finally playing The Last of Us Part 2 for Something Rotten. I believe I was fully vindicated when it was easily, by a large margin, our best performing season of all time. So I'm going to take the dub there, but I also appreciate you for, you know.
My eyebrows are sky high right now with expectations of what's coming up.
But, you know, nevertheless, even though I was vindicated and I am correct as always about why we should have played this game, I appreciate you for being willing, because, you know, we pick games we both want to play. Next year, our recording schedule is going to be changing a little bit, and I think it'll allow us a little more breathing room to work on the show without overworking. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm ready to play Disco Elysium.
Boom, 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 boom. Let's go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm ready to do it. I think when we have when we have more breathing room with the show, it'll be easy to play a game like that, because Lord knows playing Last of Us Part 2 the way we did was not sustainable.
No.
But maybe early next year. Let's finally do it.
What if 2024 is just cop year?
Cops are back. We love them now. It's not true. I went out to eat last night with my dad at this place in Minneapolis right next to the big waterfall. Can't remember the name of it, but it's like a fish stand. It's really good. Shouts out to them, friend of the show. I was wearing a Drug Church shirt that I was wearing yesterday when we recorded with Tails, and the back of that shirt has
spoilers for next season.
Right, sorry. The back of that shirt has a drawing of a cop car on fire, and it says, "The police are not your friends." And I meant to wear a flannel to cover it up because we were going to kind of a crowded area and just delighted normies might be there. Usually you're mostly okay to wear shit like that around downtown Minneapolis because, believe it or not, we don't like cops in Minneapolis.
Well, but the Minneapolis Police Department in specific is so good and helps the community so much.
Right. But, you know, I think wearing a shirt like that, you kind of have to know your place. You know what I'm saying? I don't wear it frequently around Kentucky. And I was like, I'm going to a pretty crowded area, but I forgot the flannel. And sure enough, I was like going to get a cup of water, and this lady came up to me and was not having it. And I was like, she like was like accosting me. She was like, "So cops aren't your friends, huh?" And I was like, "I'm just trying to get a cup of water, lady. Can you leave me alone?" As walking back, she was like telling the guy working, she was like, "He was being so rude to me." And I was like, "What is he gonna do? Like, how is it his problem?"
I like that she's like, "Cops aren't your friends." Also, anyone who works at any business will turn into a cop for me.
Yeah, I was like, "Lady, you're not my fucking friend either. I'm gonna get a new shirt that says this lady fucking sucks on it." Like, anyway. 2024, year of the cop. We like him now. Can't wait to tell that lady.
Oh boy. Well, that's been our question and answer episode on The Last of Us Part 2. You know, Blake, it was a good season, and I am glad that I replayed this game. So there you go. There is the vindication that I know you already knew, but it's me saying
That's
it.
right. I see the numbers. I knew I was correct. Here's what we should do. If we're being honest, next year, just do nothing but Call of Duty games. We'd be the biggest fucking video game podcast in the world. That was also a big season for us.
I don't know. I think Bullet Points is doing that right now. We can ask for their numbers. I think there's probably limited or diminishing returns.
Yeah, we should probably just do Naughty Dog games, actually.
That's right.
Or if we just pivot to being a Naughty Dog podcast.
Something
anyway,
rotten. Jack and Daxter.
I mean, Jack and Daxter 2 and 3? Yeah, kinda.
All right. That's it. Goodbye, everyone. We will see you in the next season.
Bye.